Welcome all to Amir Shakur Speaks with your host, Amir King 7 Shakur. That'll be me. And today we're talking about a specific issue that's affected our national community from an economic standpoint. So if you're ready to level up and you really want that information and you want it real, uncut, and unedited, for the next 30 to 45 minutes, we're going to show you exactly what it is. So I'd like to welcome everyone to Amir Shakur Speaks with your host, Amir King 7 Shakur. And you guys know how we do. We do things with hospitality in mind. And our guest here is someone who's a very important VIP. So I want to emphasize that, understand things from an economic standpoint. We're going to do our best to break it down tonight. But, so welcome again. And we're opening up a community conversation about problems in urban America and how, the big boys, the major corporations, sometimes tend to take advantage of us. So with that in mind, I will introduce my guest, very, very, very astute person, and I'm so happy to have her. But by the way, housekeeping, and you guys know how we do. So like, share, subscribe. Whenever you see this, let's go ahead and get this conversation started, right? So I'd like to welcome you to Amir Shakur Speaks broadcasting from the wonderful ABS Communication Studios in beautiful South Chicago. And we're bringing the best of urban information, faith and politics, and economics, all done from an inspirational perspective. And did I say if you have not done so, like and subscribe? Okay. So tonight's show is sponsored by the Chicago Urban Daily and ASN News. And remember, your voice matters, so stand up and speak out. I'd like to welcome our friends in Canada. Make some noise for Canada. And you know what? Let me give you guys some. There we go. I'd like to welcome our friends out in the UK. Give you guys some applause. And then I also would like to welcome, everyone from, the Chicagoland area. And, we welcome you guys. And New York and some of the other regions. And thank you guys for supporting the show. We appreciate it. So I want to go ahead and do the bio for my guest. And let me do the bio, and then I'm going to bring her on without further delay. But my guest, Nekima Levy Armstrong, is an American lawyer, and she's a social justice activist. Social justice, yeah, we can definitely go with that. Restorative justice, yeah, we can go with that as well. She was the president of the Minneapolis chapter of the NAACP from 2015 to 2016. And she's been involved in social justice work for years and years and years, and not just involved, but let's say the level of quality, right? So she has led a lot of organizations that focus on issues of racial equality, everything in between. Like I said, restorative justice, hailing from Minneapolis, the St. Paul area. She also was a professor of law at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis from 2003 to 2016. And then after concluding midterm, right, as the chapter president and leading her academic post, she campaigned and championed some political things, running for the mayor of Minneapolis in the 2017 election. Came in very, very high, and that is something that we love her for, and definitely will look forward to more things on the horizon. But we need her here in our community. So she's been a prominent local activist in several protests over the killing of Black Americans by police officers, police brutality, and Black America. Y'all know that's near and dear to my heart, from doing some of the major cases in America. She's also been involved in lawsuits to prevent Minneapolis from eliminating single-family zoning, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And the argument was that doing so would harm the environment. But what we really are in awe of is the quality of work, which I was talking about, with just the Target Great Land Corporation, or it used to be called Target Great Land. Some folks call it Target. We call it Target. The Target Corporation is the 7th largest retailer in the United States, operating approximately 2,000 stores across 50 states. And as of March 2026, the company is embarking on a new chapter, and I'm gonna say a humble chapter, and one of the questions that we would talk about is early in 2025, it announced that it will phase out diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI goals, and scale back its reach initiatives which supported minority-owned businesses. So with that in mind, I want to bring my guest to the stage, and I think she's the better person to really navigate those waters for us. A little bit of troubled waters, but with people like Nekima Levy Armstrong. Listen, forgive me, charge it to my heart. Don't charge it to my. Sometimes I say it. Okay, anyway, here we go. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Amir.
You are you're a blessing, and I appreciate you. So, and I think when you were coming on, I said, "Do I call you Attorney Armstrong? Do I call?" And you said, "Just call me Nekima." So I think I was really kind of going away with Attorney Armstrong, but I like proper greetings. And by the way, guys, listen, before we get too far into this, if you are here in the chat, if you want to join the conversation, come into the chat room on Amir Shakur Speaks broadcasting channel. If you want to join the conversation, you can join in, and your voice matters, so stand up and speak out. So back to you. You know what? I'm going to do this. I want to do it the right way. So I'm going to say Attorney Armstrong, okay? Do you mind if I do that?
No, I don't mind.
Okay. So let's say this. We've seen this move, and for me, it looks like it just looks like a give. It looked like a give when I first saw it to political pressure. When I say what I'm talking about is the boycott. So let's talk about the origin story, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can fill us in on, what it was and why they scaled it back, and when you came into the picture, what drew your attention to this cause?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for everybody who is tuning into the show. So as you said, I'm Nekima Levy Armstrong. I'm a civil rights attorney, a former law professor, and the founder of the Racial Justice Network, and one of 3 co-founders of the National Target Boycott. And so in terms of the backstory, you guys have seen Minneapolis and Minnesota in the news a lot in recent years. I think that we first came to the public's attention after the 2020 police killing of George Floyd. And so the 3 of us who are the co-founders of the National Target Boycott are folks who were on the front lines before, during, and after the killing of George Floyd. So it's myself, Nekima Levy Armstrong. It's Monique Cullors Doty, who is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Minnesota. She's also the aunt of Marcus Golden, a young man who was killed by the St. Paul Police Department in January of 2015. That is how Monique came into the movement. And then Jaylani Hussein, who is Somali American, runs CARE Minnesota and has been on the front lines supporting us as Black women organizers, standing with us in solidarity and lifting up issues affecting our community. So going back to 2020, as you all know, George Floyd was killed by the Minneapolis Police Department. And we had an uprising that happened here that led to the police precinct, which is the third police precinct, being set on fire by the end of that week after George Floyd was killed. And the third precinct is actually right across the street from a Target store on Lake Street. And during the uprising, if let's say somebody was tear gassed by the police, they tried to run in Target employees would lock the doors and wouldn't even let people come in to buy milk, to stop the burning of their eyes during the uprising. And so Target was intimately aware of the concerns that the Black community was facing and experiencing. And in 2021, they emerged as a national leader of racial equity. They actually put out a $2.1 billion pledge in response to the killing of George Floyd. And they said this $2.1 billion will be for 4 primary reasons. Number 1, to improve the Black customer shopping experience. Number 2, to improve the hiring and promotion practices when it came to Black employees. Number 3, to put more Black brands on the shelves. And number 4, to improve their supplier diversity network. And so a lot of us cheered when Target, came out with this pledge. It made them a corporate leader on racial equity at the time and made many of us in our community feel much more comfortable, feeling like Target was a place that cared and, embraced diversity and welcomed our community. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but during Black History Month, there would always be these elaborate displays with Black brands, just making us all feel welcome. So much to our shock and disappointment, on January 24th of 2025, Target issued a statement saying that it was rolling back their focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they did this in response to the Trump administration. This was the same week that Donald Trump had sworn his oath to become president of the United States for a second time. And right away, he began attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion, doing all these executive orders. And Target was one of the first companies that capitulated or bowed down to Donald Trump, saying that they were going to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so Monique Cullors Doty, who I referenced earlier, sent me a text with a link to an article showing that Target's decision. And of course, she said, have you seen this? And I read it, and I was just so disappointed that Target would do such a thing. Knowing what they meant to our community, knowing what they meant in the aftermath of George Floyd being killed, and really showing their true colors in that moment. So the next morning, I took to Facebook and I began a dialogue with our community, which I thought was important because of how embedded Target is, in the fabric of, Minnesota's culture, right? Like our kids would bring home Target gift cards during the holidays. They would have the little Target red shopping bags that would be, filled with stuff. Target sponsored a lot of events by Black-led organizations. And so Target really felt like an integral part of our community. So I went to the community to say, look, did you guys see this news about Target rolling back DEI and capitulating to Donald Trump? What steps are you planning to take individually, and what should we do collectively to hold this company accountable? And so people started responding, saying they were going to cut up their red cards. They weren't going to shop at Target anymore. There was a sister named Leslie Taylor, older Black woman, who said, we need to do a blackout of Target. And so after gathering this input from community, then I went back to Monique and Jaylani and had a conversation with them about what we would do. And at that point, we decided we were going to launch a nationwide boycott of Target. So we started working on our press release on the 25th of January. We put it out on January 28th after we did our research. And then we held a press conference outside of Target's global headquarters in downtown Minneapolis, announcing a nationwide boycott of Target that would begin on February 1st of 2025 to coincide with the start of Black History Month. And so in between January 25th and January 28th, I started getting calls from one of my former law students who was friends with Tamika Mallory, saying that Tamika wanted a call with me and she wanted to know what we were going to do about Target. And so I responded and said, okay, I'm willing to meet with them. And then I sent our press release to my former law student, who then sent it to Tamika Mallory. So I got on a call with them on January 29th, the day before our press conference, and talked to them about our plans to launch a national Target boycott. Tamika Mallory said that she wanted to set up a mothership, which is basically a national coalition to try to amplify our efforts around the boycott. And on that call was Tamika Mallory. It was Pastor Jamal Bryant. It was Nina Turner, Linda Sarsar from the Women's March, a young Reverend Stephen Green, and another young man who I didn't know. And I took them at their word that they were going to try to amplify our efforts.
Mm-hmm.
But the days that followed, that's not what happened. So,
let me jump in there, Attorney Armstrong. So for those, and I just want to add a visual perspective. Let me remove. So this is the Target that we're talking about. Just to kind of paint a picture. So. What Attorney Armstrong is saying is that Target is currently still navigating intense criticism and still receiving financial losses and legal challenges following a major retreat from DEI, right? And the commitments from early 2025. And the company adopted these programs to address social inequality after the George Floyd incident, but it began rolling them back to stay in sharp contrast to the Trump administration and the Trump White House. And they gave in the pressure. They were one of the companies who, shocked the community. So, and going back to you, Attorney, we want to go ahead and let me just remove that. And I just wanted to bring that visual up. So going back to you and your efforts, when you recognize and you begin to push, how long did it take for you guys to kind of gain a consensus and start really going towards the momentum? Was it a press conference? Was it, what was like the first initial, the initial order that was put out with the initiative?
So that very day, the 25th, after I went to the community online through Facebook and Instagram and saw that there was an appetite for us to hold Target accountable, that's when I reached out to Monique and Jaylani, right, and gave them the feedback from the community. And that's when we decided in that moment that we were going to launch a national boycott. And so from there, we started doing our research. We put our press release together. And we had said, on January 30th is when we'll hold our press conference outside of Target's global headquarters. And then that the boycott would begin on February 1st. So literally, we set it in motion shortly after finding out about Target's decision. And I will say that one of the things that factored into the decision is the fact that because Target was seen as a company that embraced diversity and was seen as one of the most progressive companies in America, we figured that if Target was allowed to get away with this, every company in America was going to follow suit. Because if you recall, during that time, we had already seen rollbacks, of DEI from companies like Walmart. People were saying Amazon was rolling back DEI, and there was no collective response, to those companies making the decision. But in the Twin Cities, because we have an active movement around racial justice and accountability, we moved quickly to say, we're not going to let this happen on our watch, and certainly not in our backyard, with a Minnesota company being able to get away with this without there being some repercussion. And so we held the press conference. It was covered nationally, and we announced the national Target boycott. So when you see National Target Boycott. That is our branding from Minnesota, enlisting folks around the country, right? Black people, white allies, Latinos, anybody who felt a connection to Target and who wanted to help hold them accountable were invited to participate in this boycott.
So with the rollback of the initiative, and once you got the boycott going, what was there any did the administration reach out to you? And I mean, anybody from the Trump administration? Probably not, but it's just a question. And or was there anybody from the company after the press conference going forward that reached out to you guys in your effort?
We did not receive contact from the Trump administration, who we called out during our press conference, and we talked specifically about Target aligning itself with the authoritarian regime, of the Trump administration, as well as fascism. And we talked about the harm that the Trump administration was doing and just how disappointed we were that Target would align itself with the Trump administration. So, of course, they didn't reach out to us. Target didn't reach out to us. But who did respond? It was the people. So people showed up at the press conference. An ally brought their red Target card, and gave it to us with some scissors. We had one of our activists, Chantel Allen, cut the card up, on camera, just to symbolize, look, this is right now, we're all walking away, from Target, and we're not going to shop there unless and until they reverse their decision to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that was our top demand. And then our second demand, we had a total of 6, but our second demand was that Target account for the $2.1 billion that it pledged after George Floyd was killed. We thought those were the 2 most important demands. And then later, we added additional demands around Target's involvement in surveillance, in our community, and aiding law enforcement around surveillance, as well as them paying the Hennepin County Attorney's Office here under Amy Klobuchar, who is a senator, in Congress and who is running for governor right now. But she was once a prosecutor. Her and another prosecutor, Mike Freeman, from our understanding, received funds from Target, saying we don't just want arrest, we want conviction. And one of those convictions was a wrongful conviction of a young immigrant man who was a child at the time, just a teenager, who was convicted of murders he did not commit. And Target sent forensic analysts to testify at his trial. And so this man right now is in his early 30s, and he has been in prison since he was 15 or 16 years old for crimes he did not commit. And so this young man is named Mahdi Ali. So we are calling on Target to make things right, in terms of their involvement in the wrongful conviction of this young man. So all of these things are connected to what happened in Minnesota, but also broader concerns, that we face as Black folks, in American society, when a company turns its back on one of its core customer bases and aligns itself with an authoritarian regime, such as the Trump administration.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off.
I was just going to say real quick, we found out after we launched the boycott that Target also donated $1 million to the Trump Vance Inauguration Committee.
Wow.
So you think about Walmart. Walmart donated $250,000, and they're not even trying to hold themselves out as embracing diversity. But Target took it even further and donated $1 million. They had never donated to Democrats or Republicans' inauguration committees in the past. And yet they chose to do this with the Trump administration, signaling that they chose a side. So, and so did we as the people.
So the rollback was partly a response to previous concern. I mean, when you speak about inclusiveness with the boycott, I don't mean with their actions, but with the boycotts, I mean, there were also other prior conservative boycotts, which we want to notate, like over Black plot, LGBTQ merchandise, which, they pulled back the carpet on that. And, this thing about woke culture, which, that's a whole 3 hour long conversation, and Target attempted to appease by, scaling back certain products and highlighting other products. Listen, I do have videos of me participating in surveys when the boycott was first announced. I didn't want to show you because I don't want to embarrass myself. I should have gotten with your efforts, but I know better now. I will say this. I went and did surveys of what Black products were still on the shelves, what weren't on the shelves, and this was during Black History Month. So, and I just wanted to see, where they were at. And I think I saw one little gondola, and all of their products were on, all of the Black products were on that gondola. And I'm like, that can't be good. Let me ask you a question, Attorney Armstrong. Any of the Black vendors that had supported and were on Target shelves, did any of those folks come and join or make any comments for the boycott, your efforts in the leadership?
There were some Black vendors who removed their products from Target in solidarity with the boycott.
Beautiful.
One Black vendor reached out to me recently, on Instagram, and I gave her my contact information so that when things slow down for her, she can reach back out to me and we can strategize. Because there are, of course, Black businesses that are suffering because they worked hard to get into Target, only to, be impacted by the boycott. And so you had some Black brands that directed people to their websites to buy directly from them, which I think is the best way to go, right? It's one thing, I'm an entrepreneur as well. And so it's one thing to work hard and get your products on the shelves, which those businesses should be applauded. That is not simple for people to do. It costs time, it costs money, to get their products on the shelves. But at any point in time, these companies can decide they don't want Black brands on the shelves anymore. And because of the direction that Target was headed in, I feel that it was just a matter of time before they pulled some of those Black products from the shelves anyway.
Yeah.
Right? So that to me means us setting up our own independent ways for people to buy from Black businesses and not being dependent on one company. That has shown that it will flip-flop, depending on which administration they decide to align themselves with. That's not true economic freedom for Black businesses.
Can I show this? Let me show this graphic, and you don't have to. You can comment on it if you want, and I just want to know, was this graphic corresponding with any of your efforts and the leadership's efforts on the ground, like concluding its 3-year DEI goals? This is Target ends its DEI, concluding its racial equality. So this is what they did. Stopping all external diversity focused surveys. I don't know what that meant, but this is actually a graphic that shows what their plan was to end it. So I guess, let me just recap real quick for the people who are joining. If you're just joining, attorney Nekima Levy Armstrong is one of the leaders and the foundational leader of the actual Target, the national Target boycott, which is still ongoing. I want to clarify that. Quote me, put that in quotations. It has not stopped. And there was confusion. We won't spend a lot of time on the confusion piece. I'll let you, handle that. I had some videos and all of that, but I don't really want to. I want to talk about where we go from here. But I do want to say that, history has shown us that the Montgomery bus boycott took a consolidated effort of folks, and they didn't have internet. They didn't have the tools and the resources that we have today. And there was a boycott that changed history. Well, this, for me, Attorney Armstrong, is the closest thing that we've seen to a modern day equivalent of the Montgomery bus boycott. And I want to ask you, in the case, what was the amount of loss to Target that they've endured since day one, since ground zero?
Well, I will say that this boycott has been extremely successful. That's why you had the confusion, that we dealt with on March 11th with the announcement that was made by Pastor Jamal Bryant, after meeting with Target because it has been successful. So in terms of the wins thus far with this boycott, number one, Target has lost over $12 billion in its market valuation.
12 billion
of this boycott. They had to oust their CEO, Brian Cornell. He also lost millions of dollars in compensation as a result of this boycott. There have been consecutive months of declining foot traffic and website traffic since the start of this boycott. Target was removed from the Forbes list of 40 most admired companies for the first time in 24 years. They have had a declining stock value since the start of this boycott. They have had to fire people and not fill positions as a result of this boycott, and they have taken reputational hits as well. And so, like you said, it has been very successful, and Target didn't expect that. Neither did the media. You know, it was so hard for us to get the media to take the boycott seriously initially and to credit the boycott as Target was having all these impacts. They tried to find everything under the sun but the boycott, but we knew all along that the boycott was going to be successful. You know, again, as folks who fought for George Floyd and many other people who have been killed by police, many other movements and campaigns that we have led in Minnesota, and you all as a nation saw what happened after Operation Metro Surge, or during Operation Metro Surge, where the Trump administration sent thousands of ICE agents to Minnesota. You all saw how we as a community in the tens of thousands stood up against ICE and showed up. That's the energy and the spirit of the people here in Minnesota. So we knew that it was going to be successful. We knew that Target was going to try to hide the ball and pretend, but their new CEO has come out and talked about the fact that the boycott has impacted their sales, impacted, you know, how they do business.
Michael Fidelki, right? I'm sorry, the new CEO. I believe it's Michael Fidelki. Is that how?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
They hired from the inside. They really should have brought in an external person, in my opinion. But he has acknowledged that the boycott has had an impact, you know, on Target, and so that's undeniable. That's the Black buying power BMA manifest that we've been talking about for years. But this is the first time we've seen it visibly in the 21st century, where our collective buying power has made a significant difference on a company. And like I said, it wasn't just Target that was impacted. All those companies that would have quickly capitulated to Donald Trump said, wait a minute, hold on, we don't want the Target treatment. And some of them doubled down on their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Sure.
Because they didn't want to endure a boycott, you know, like Target. And so it had multiple effects. And then it also led to other economic boycotts. Remember the Tesla takedown that happened, you know, where they targeted Tesla because of Elon Musk and Doge. There was a Latino freeze as well. There was the 40-day fast that somehow became a 400-day fast and got conflated with the boycott. There was the rolling national economic boycotts that happened because we taught people about the power of the purse and how we're not helpless, you know, when these companies decide to betray, you know, us and our dollar. When they decide to put profits over people, we fought back by voting with our dollars, which was something that they never expected. And they definitely didn't think that we would have the self-discipline to continue for over a year. And that's why I feel that they engage with these shenanigans with Pastor Jamal Bryant, Tamika Mallory, and Nina Turner, you know, to create this confusion that, you know, has happened. But the boycott is still alive and well. It's still very active.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And so let me ask you a question in reference to that. And we're going to play that video right now. And we just played that video. Thank you. All right. So I do want to ask you. So I did happen to catch, and I looked all over the internet. I couldn't find it anymore, but you definitely did an interview with Roland Martin, and it was in reference to, I think it was the day of, or maybe the day after Pastor Brian announced that the boycott was over with. And thank you for clarifying that it is ongoing as we speak. But was there ever a commingling of efforts? Did those folks ever come and get with you guys and say, hey, let's get this effort going together? I want to address it. We want to address this together, because it almost seemed like, again, it was a contradiction, and it looked strange to me, Attorney Armstrong, because I mean, again, I know that there were other efforts going on around the country, but it seemed like this particular group was speaking for everyone and making decisions for everyone, and nobody asked them to speak for everyone.
Absolutely. So in terms of how that all began, so remember when I was saying in the beginning, when we made the decision that we were going to launch a national boycott, one of my former law students was reaching out to me on behalf of Tamika Mallory. They were friends at the time. And Tamika wanted me to meet with her and, these national folks, claiming that they were going to help amplify our efforts around the boycott. But literally, and during that meeting, like I said, they had our press release by then. They knew that we were getting ready to hold our press conference the next day. And I thought that they were genuine, about amplifying our efforts around the boycott. However, by February, so this all, I met with them on January 29th. We called our press conference on January 30th. By February 6th, I then received a call offline from Tamika Mallory, letting me know that Pastor Jamal Bryant was going to launch a 40-day target fast to coincide with Lent. And I said, I don't understand this. I said, if there's already a national boycott underway, why would he launch a 40-day fast? And what's the difference between a fast and a boycott? And I let her know that I thought that this would create confusion. And then she asked me what our demands were. I shared them with her. And then she shared with me that he had already set up a targetfast.org website. So it felt like co-opting beginning to happen within the first week of this so-called, national coalition being formed. And so a couple days later, so she had called me February 6th, 2025, February 8th. I looked at the website, and that's when I said, wait a minute now. There's no mention on this website, targetfast.org, that there's already a national boycott underway, that it originated in Minneapolis and how it was connected to George Floyd in our community. I see a picture of Kirk Franklin on the website, which didn't make any sense to me.
What does Kirk Franklin have to do?
Exactly.
Maybe he's gonna sing praises to pray him out of business. I don't.
It didn't make a lick of sense to me. And then two of our demands were on the website, along with a bunch of other demands that really weren't focused on DEI. Yeah. And so I texted the group, and I said, I'm confused. And I said, can someone help me understand, what's happening here with this Target Fast situation? It's going to create confusion. I laid all the things out. And at the time, Tamika said she was taking a flight and couldn't fully respond. And then she asked, Jamal Bryant to address the concerns. They never got addressed. Turns out she was flying to Atlanta, to sell her books at New Birth, which is Jamal Bryant's church. So then when I found that out, I realized Tamika is not going to stand up for us and what we're saying.
Yeah, this was an economic opportunity for her.
Yes, too locked in with what Pastor Jamal Bryant could offer, because of course he has a large platform. She and Nina both have larger platforms than we do as grassroots organizers, because that's not what we do. We focus on organizing and lifting up our community, and it could have been something positive, but right away, there just seemed to be a different agenda at work. And so literally Jamal Bryant, hired a publicist to go to Roland Martin's show, The Breakfast Club, CNN, and he started positioning himself as the national Target boycott leader. Talking about the fast initially, but over time, as you can see, the terminology fast and boycott were conflated to where people thought he was the face. And then by March 8th of 2025, I stepped away from their group along with my former law student because we saw that they had a different agenda. They were trying to co-opt the boycott and not take seriously the confusion and the concerns that we were raising. So we just stepped away from them completely and just continued organizing here in the Twin Cities and continuing to get the word out about the boycott and reporting on the successes of the boycott. And then in the meantime, you would see graphics of the three of their faces. They had positioned themselves as a Mothership 3, as the national boycott leaders. They got awards.
Those were promos that were going on? Those
promos with the three of their faces, which is not how grassroots
like a Mount Rushmore type promo.
Yes, absolutely. And they got awards from the Route 100. Jamal Bryant received the NAACP Image Award all around the boycott, knowing that it originated, here in the Twin Cities, where Target.
Without acknowledging your work. Listen, but I will say this, and not to interrupt you, we're going to do the outro, but I do have one last question for you, and then I want to do the outro if you don't mind. But let me ask you this. I will say that however you reached out to them and got the message, I have never seen Pastor Jamal Bryant humbled to the level. So whatever message you sent, and you sent it with a level of intensity, because there was a sense of urgency in his recap right away, and the apology tour began really. So how did you navigate those? Because he really rescinded a lot of the original statements, and then the next phase of it within days was, hey, Nekima Levy Armstrong is the leader. Our prayers are the word. But he also was talking about Nina's efforts, and he also included Tamika Mallory as well. But there was still a little bit of co-opting and probably a lot going on behind the scenes as well. But how did you reach them as quickly as you did? Was it just a matter of calls? Was it a matter of having to come to Jesus talk? What was it?
Well, if you look back, so January, I believe it was like late January, early February, on his podcast, he actually did a portion and said Nekima Levy Armstrong is the first person to call for the Target boycott, right? He actually did a little collage featuring my work, calling me a super bad sister. And this was after the city's church protest that we did, in St. Paul, Minnesota, calling attention to an ICE pastor, David Easterwood, who is a pastor at City's Church, but also the regional director of ICE, overseeing their conduct here in Minnesota. So somehow he got wind of that protest, which made national news, in part because of Don Lemon being there as a journalist covering that protest. So that led for him to actually do a segment on his podcast highlighting my work. And so in the aftermath of all of this, when they did their press conference in Washington, D.C., trying to call for an end to the boycott or the Target fast, the reaction from the Black community was very swift.
Right.
People said, wait a minute, you don't speak for our community. Who appointed you the leader? I'm never going back to Target. So I feel that backlash from our people made a huge difference in getting his attention. Then you saw Tamika and Nina, who I feel were part of the confusion. Because if you knew this man was going to call for an end to the fast, to the boycott, why were you with him in Washington, D.C. if you didn't agree? If y'all are a Mothership 3, then they should have been united in the messaging, and they weren't. So that contributed to the confusion. While he's saying it's the end, they're saying, well, we're not going back to Target, and putting out messaging as if it's over. And so because of that backlash, they started retreating too, and they're still trying to cover their tracks as far as I'm concerned and make it look like, oh, this was just a miscommunication. It wasn't a miscommunication. They all knew full well what the concerns were. They doubled down, they branded themselves as a Mothership 3. And then when it blew up, now you're seeing mixed messaging, and you're seeing Pastor Jamal Bryant at least did apologize,
yes,
and acknowledge Black women's leadership. But there's efforts behind the scenes to try to position Nina Turner as a Target boycott leader. And to be honest with you, after my experience with Nina Turner, Nina couldn't lead me from one side of the street to the next. It's just a reality because of her participation in the confusion and her not standing up for us as Black women when I brought to their attention that this boycott was being co-opted and this confusion was going to, impact the community. And so there are efforts that they're still trying to make to downplay, our work in the Twin Cities as the national target boycott leaders. But we're continuing to fight back because as far as I'm concerned, this isn't about Black people battling in public. This is really a community safety issue. You have to know who are real, who's real when it comes to leadership in our community, right? Who's standing on business, who's clear in their messaging and their purpose, and who has other agendas going on.
Who's not being co-opted.
Yeah, and even Roland Martin. Roland knew all of this last year. He contacted me. I have been on Roland's show many times in the past talking about police accountability issues. And he contacted me in April of 2025 after the news spread that Reverend Al Sharpton had met with the CEO of Target, even though he had nothing to do with the boycott. So Target had already started trying to kick off Black leaders, to try to get our community to stop the boycott. So Reverend Al Sharpton met with Target leader CEO along with Jamal Bryant. Even though Jamal wasn't in the picture, Reverend Al Sharpton told me in January of 2026 what really happened, that he and Jamal met with the CEO of Target, and Jamal jumped out of the picture because he didn't want Tamika and Nina to know that he met with the CEO without them. So so Roland Martin thought that Reverend Al Sharpton was trying to co-opt the boycott. So then that's when they told him about our leadership of the boycott. And so he reached out to me saying, I'm going to start a coalition, a national coalition. Will you join? And I said, no. If it's with these same people who, disrespected our community, who launched a totally separate movement without acknowledging there was already a boycott, I said, they showed me who they were and they lack integrity. So no, I'm not joining a coalition with them. And so Roland Martin knew this. He knew these problems. Yet, because Jamal Bryant is his frat brother, because Roland probably thought he was going to get some of that Black press money that Jamal Bryant was asking for, he aligned with them and never truly set the record straight. Then he asked me to be on his show once I became vocal. I tried to be vocal before then, but people wouldn't listen until after their press conference caused a lot of questions and confusion. And so Roland Martin asked me to be on his show. So I went with the intention of confronting him and laying it out and not falling into the trap he was trying to set for me. Because you can see right away, first of all, you play a 9-minute apology video or however long, uninterrupted, before you bring me on. And then right away, you're trying to ask me questions as if you didn't just play this video. So I already knew what Roland Martin was trying to do. Like I said on Larry Reed's show, he tried to play in my face, so I played in his. And so that's why it was an intense conversation. That's why I saw that holding Roland Martin accountable, and not letting him put out the okie doke. He didn't want me to tell the full story of what happened because he was not only complicit, he interfered in the boycott going far beyond what a journalist is supposed to do. He platformed them, knowing that they lacked credibility and that they were trying to co-opt the boycott in our efforts from organizers in Minnesota, which just wasn't right.
Let me go to one of the comments and then I'm going to do the outro. I'm going to come back to you and then I want you to just address where we go from here. But this person says, is a VIP of ours, Ramona. It's so unfortunate that when people do that, I'm
glad you're speaking out.
Yeah. That I'm glad you're speaking out, and please continue to push forward with your efforts. And I'm glad you're speaking out so we can understand what happens. I know that she's probably typing, so our voice memo is not what it should be. But yeah, so she's saying thank you for your efforts, and we are too. I will say this to you, Attorney Armstrong, and what I want to do is I just want to pull this graphic up and I'll give you the end to really address where we go from here. But I want to say, if you're just joining us or if you're going to review this taping, as of March 26. What's today? The 24th, right? March 24th. We need to understand that the Target boycott is not over with, right? The national Target boycott movement is still going forward. And you've heard it here directly from the leadership. I didn't make it up. So this is the actual boycott. It's still going forward. I also want to say to Target, your folks, the team, the corporate office, the new CEO, Michael Fidelki, and so on and so forth. We know that you guys are tasked with restoring Target's reputation and addressing your declining sales and navigating through the polarization of your reputation while you're trying to recover it. But we just want you guys to do the right thing. And I can tell you, this sister here, this strong, intelligent, focused, determined young lady is not going to stop in her efforts. And not only is she not going to stop, but we're going to join her in her efforts. So we just want to make it known that, let's do the right thing, Target. And the community, listen, the Montgomery bus boycott took a consensus. It was a consolidated effort of folks on the ground who didn't worry about political pressure. They weren't worried about even the economic downflow because they suffered. So we got to look at history and we got to take a note from history. But what you guys are seeing is the largest, the most significant for me. And, some folks can correct me, but it's my subjective opinion and I'm entitled to it. This is the most significant boycott for me since the Montgomery bus boycott at Termini Armstrong. So we're with you. What would you say? Where do we go from here? And I want you to also say, before you finish, how people can reach you and support the efforts.
Well, thank you again, Amir, for covering this on your show and allowing me to be on here. I want to thank Ramona for her comments and her support. That means a lot to me and the organizers on the ground in Minnesota. That's right. And I would say people can go to our national Target boycott website, because again, it's National Target Boycott. That's our branding. Go to our website, nationaltargetboycott.com. There's information on there. I urge people, continue the boycott. Continue not shopping at Target and double down, because most of us have held fast in refusing to shop at Target. And even people online who are like, I had to go in for this, but I'm not going back. And so we say double down on that. Let your friends and family know that the boycott is still going on, not to shop at Target. And people can organize in their own local communities, right? There's folks in Washington, D.C. who every week are protesting outside of Target. We've had many protests here outside of Target's headquarters, outside of their stores. We've had people boycotting because of Target also participating with ICE, being complicit in ICE, staging in their parking lots as they were going to go raid, various neighborhoods during Operation Metro Surge. And the fact that Target is doubling down and not reversing their stance on DEI shows you that they really don't seem to care that they're losing so many Black customers as well as white allies. We have white women here in Minnesota and men who are standing 10 toes down behind this boycott and who are saying that they're never going back into Target or that they won't go back until Target restores diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we have a lot of support around the country, and I'm urging people continue supporting this boycott. It is successful. If it wasn't, we wouldn't have dealt with the shenanigans that we dealt with. But our people, are behind this success. The grassroots movement, our people, our community, is the reason across the nation that this boycott is so successful. So I'm proud. I feel like Dr. King will be proud of us. Rosa Parks will be proud of us.
It sure
People
would.
who laid the groundwork in Montgomery will be proud of us for seeing their blueprint and putting it in action in the 21st century to combat companies that don't respect the Black dollar.
Right. And let me say this to those in urban America. Let's look at this particular model as a paradigm for what we want to do versus what we don't want to do And, I like urban America. I like that term because, that encompasses a little bit more general base, the poor folk, just everyone, the Latino and the folks in the urban community. But I do want to say that, while we have a community that has a lot of the shared visions, unfortunately, throughout history, we've had to lead the way. And, going all the way back to the civil rights movements, folks in the African American community, we want to distinguish those folks and the trailblazers who've done the work, including folks like you today. And whoever said that you're one bad sister, I'm gonna say you are one bad sister. you're yes.
Glory. I'm just a vessel.
Yeah, no.
People, and I'll do whatever I can, 10 toes down, fighting for our liberation, freedom, justice, and equality.
Yeah, well, no, thank you for being who you are. I will reach out to you and see how we can support the effort on the ground with the actual national boycott. And, folks, listen, again, that's our time today. If you want to reach out to the attorney and then really support their efforts, again, that's nationaltargetboycott.com. Is that correct? That is the correct. Go to that website and reach out to her and her team. And Attorney Armstrong is a guy saying I'm gonna put you on my angel list. And folks, you know what? Let me say this. I'm just gonna say this, even though that's our time today. Remember, the conversations don't have to end when the screen goes black. They're just beginning. And not only do we need conversations, we need action and resolution. So let's get that resolve going. Let's support this action and let's continue building, because remember something, we're bigger than just a economic platform. We're bigger than, allowing folks to dictate to us when we're spending our hard-earned dollars. We gotta let these people know that there has to be a accountability when it comes to being in our community. So the standard of excellence in leadership starts here with folks like Nekima Levy Armstrong. And let's go ahead and follow this example. Let's go spread some love. Please share, share, and subscribe. And again, peace and power to all of you. I appreciate you again, Attorney.
Thank you, Amir. I appreciate you as well as the listeners.
Thank you so much. All right. Listen, y'all, feel free to reach out to us and we'll get back at you. And thank you for watching. Appreciate it.